Hello, welcome to Collateral Impact. This is the third in our series. And for those of you who were not with us during the first couple of series, what I'm attempting to do is to share my perceptions about things that have impacted my life, whether they are people, places, or things. In the first series, we talked about just my general impression of how I view life. In the second, it dealt with our common humanity, how and why we should try to communicate or relate better to each other. And today, I'd like to share what I call just a few words of wisdom from people that I've met or people that I know or even relatives. So some are famous, some you may never have heard of. And at the very top of my list is a quote that I'll read for you. It says, "For the plans that I have for you," and if you want to know the rest of it, you might check Jeremiah 29:11. And the reason I started with that is I consider that my life verse. It's what I call to mind when things are going well or when things aren't going so well. And what I find is I get strength in those times of distress, and it kind of levels me off when I think that I'm totally in control. And so what I've done is I made a list of people. One is Dr. Joseph White. Dr. White has been a mentor extraordinaire, I might say. And he says you always have to have a healthy fear of folks. I'll leave the word that he used, but what he was saying is that you have to have a vigorous mentality for your surroundings. You cannot believe that you would be in something involving the improvement of human beings' lives and think that there won't be opposition. And so he was always conscious of having me be conscious. He said, always remember when you're in the struggle for human rights, it's always to be on your guard. And his famous words are, keep the faith. The next one on my list is Dr. Leon Sullivan. Dr. Sullivan is a Baptist minister, about 6'5", 6 feet tall, with a voice that rumbles the equivalent of his height. And he had a saying that it isn't the color of a balloon that rises, that causes it to rise, it's what's inside. And using that analogy, he was able to organize an organization called the Opportunities Industrialization Centers. It begins with an agreement with the city of Philadelphia to allow him to rent a jail, abandoned jail, for $1 a month. He was able to get job training people, come in and train people, because his philosophy was integration without preparation is frustration. Reverend Sullivan instilled in me something that I'll never forget. He said, Otis, don't ever leave this movement. And I never have, and I never will, actually. Another on my list, and these aren't in a list of priorities other than the first one, is my father. Whenever I would say to him, Dad, I didn't know that, he would say, just keep living. And I'd hear that, but I really wouldn't pay that much attention to it. But it always comes to mind whenever I find myself in a circumstance that I didn't previously know before. And then I would think, that's what he meant. Just keep living. And that's what we should do when we come across things that we just don't understand. Maybe it's going to take a little more time to come to grips with what's really happening. And I go down my list. I can't leave my mother out. She says something that I won't forget either, other than when she was teaching me to drive. She said, "Don't hit those parked cars." But her thing was, everybody has to pull their own little red wagon. And, sometimes you can hear things and they just kind of pass by. You don't really think that much about them. But when I was young, I, I, I was trying to defend somebody who had stolen some money from a very rich guy. And I tried to convince my mother that, look, he had a lot of money. What difference does it make? And she said, yeah, but none of his money belonged to the thief. And so that kind of like set me back. And once, again, she's always telling me things that really were so simple, but so profound. I came home one day from elementary school, and we were learning addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. So I said, "Mother, how do you figure this problem out?" I said, and she said, "What is it?" I said, "Well, it's like 3, 8, and 7. And she said, "What can you do with it?" So that answered that question. So just one more on my list is, I guess from my wife. I don't want to leave her out. I had this habit of saying, "You always do such and such." And so she finally corrected me in a way that I never say that to her again. She said, "I never always do anything.